Well, and I thank y'all for doing this, and also thank y'all for inviting me down. I enjoyed doing this. Becky's asked me a couple of times, and we're going to, you can, yeah, why don't you can expand that a little bit at the top.
Perfect.
There we go. And as you'll see on that second line, and I thought she was going to be able to send this out to you ahead of time, but that's okay. We'll go through it. My goal is to answer as many of your questions as possible. I find out the best way in which to teach anybody at any time is if you answer their questions, they're going to go away with 80% of the answers. If I just give you a bunch of information, you might go away with 40 or 50% of it because some of it's not of interest to you. I want to answer your questions. I'll do the best I can. If for some reason I do not answer any of your questions or what you're looking for, my telephone number is right there and my email address as well. I had got calls from your group last year and helped some people out during the year, and be glad to do that again. So feel free to use me as a resource if at all possible. Normally, when I do this process, and we don't do it on Zoom, what we do is we go through and spend about 4 or 5 minutes asking everybody to give me a question, or the question that they really want answered. And then when we get to that question, or when I'm doing the presentation, I try real hard to include those questions in there. The way we're doing it now, we'll probably just have to, do y'all have, is there a, well, is there a chat on here, or is there a way for me to?
Yes.
Okay, and so we can, if people have a particular question, they can, yeah, or just, it doesn't bother me.
They can put their questions in the chat box, and I'll monitor chat.
Okay, that will be great. That would be great. Okay, the first thing you as even presidents of clubs and as your treasurer is to understand your responsibility both to all the authorities. And so the number one thing I always ask is our club exempt from income taxes? And is there any way, and I know that it could be difficult, but is there any way that we can unmute everybody and have participation that way, or do we need to do it this way?
We can unmute.
Yeah.
Okay.
I unmuted myself, so I think everybody should be able to unmute.
That's great, because what I really like is participation from y'all as to, I can give you all the answers, but that here again, that's not what I was looking at. For example, is our club exempt from income taxes? Yes or no?
No.
No.
And
You're not? Oh, you thought that was a trick question, huh? Well, you are exempt for your exempt function activities because you are a 501c4. Now, a 501c4 is a benevolent organization. A 501c6, for example, would be a trade association. So are there any times when a club is required to pay income taxes?
if you reach over 50,000, I think it is.
Well, you're correct as it relates to the 50,000, but not because of the 50,000. The issue as it relates to income taxes is if you are doing an activity that's not a part of your exempt function, that is regularly carried on and not specifically excluded by code sections 512, 513, and 514, you would be subject to tax. An example of that would be advertising. Advertising by its nature is subject to income tax. Now Rotary, but the difference in sponsorship and advertising, and I'm going to go through it just very quickly because most of the Rotarians that are on this call, all of you are doing it voluntarily, and there is an exemption for activities in which all of the activity is done by volunteers. So if you're doing it all by volunteers, the advertising would not be subject to income tax. But if you're using other people, and sometimes there may be an argument that they're using publishing companies and stuff like this, that some of it might be subject to income tax. So the difference in advertising is when when you have an ad that, or a listing of a company, and they say, we're the greatest plumbers in town. Well, that's a marketing activity, that's an advertisement. If you just list that company, ABC Plumbing, it is not subject to income tax and never will be. So the difference is advertising is subject to income tax usually unless completely done by volunteers. Sponsorship is not subject to income tax because for sponsorship, the only thing that you are giving somebody is the name, and the name can be written everywhere. It can be on literature, it can be on T-shirts, it can be on hats, like your golf tournaments, and somebody wants to sponsor it, and they put their name on the hat, the shirts, whatever like that. No problem with that, and that's not considered advertising. But if you put on the shirt, ABC Plumbing, best plumbing in Central Texas or West Texas or East Texas or wherever, then it would be subject to advertising. Let's go to the next.
Thank you, Mitch.
At the bottom, are your donations charitable deductions?
Ronnie,
Yes, ma'am.
we have a question from Barbie. Her question is, what if that is part of their logo?
That becomes the problem. And Southwest Airlines, for example, has that particular problem. And so because that person, and Barbie, if all of your work is being done by volunteers, you don't have a problem with it anyway. But some of you are on nonprofit organizations in which you came on this call to understand the whole ramifications. So if you've got an executive director or staff or whatever like this that's helping you, then that advertising is going to be subject to tax. Part of the logo, you have to be very, very careful. And probably part of the logo, depending on what it is in the logo. If it's marketing, then it's subject to advertising. Now, the income is subject to advertising, but the cost of getting the advertising, the cost of publishing it, the cost of all those expenses are a deduction from it as well. Plus, any net income is only taxable if it exceeds $1,000 in net income. Barbie, did that answer your question?
You said yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it did. Thank you so much.
You bet. Okay. Are donations made to your club tax deductible as a charitable contribution? That's an easy one.
Yes.
I'm sorry, what?
No.
No. You're not a 501c3 organization. You're a 501c4. Now, some of your clubs will have a 501c3 foundation as well as a 501c4, the Rotary Club. And that's how you can take care of that. So let's walk through real quickly what your club might do. Remember a 501c4, payments made to it. Even when you go out and solicit funds for a great charitable cause, when you listed the funds and that person writes a check to your Rotary Club, it is not a charitable deduction. It's not. So what you can do is you can turn around and number one, you can create a 501c3 if you want to. Or number two, if you have a golf tournament in which you're giving it to half the money to Meals on Wheels, then you can have them write a check for the golf tournament. Let's say it's $200. It's going to cost you $100 for the green fees and things of this sort. And they write $100 to the club and they write $100 to Meals on Wheels. That becomes a charitable deduction. And that's how you can partner with whoever you're doing the activity for. But if you're just raising the funds to be spent later on, please know you cannot tell the contributor that it's a charitable deduction. Going on. In what cases can payments to the club be deductible as a business expense? Or can it be deducted as a business expense? Most recently at the IRS, most recently within the last year, has gotten real stickler about that, and they don't believe that dues to Rotary clubs are deductible. Now, there is no itemized deductions for Rotary, for Schedule A, itemized deductions. If you itemize, there is no deduction for miscellaneous itemized deductions. So that's where it normally would go if you were just an individual. But if you are a business, it's my opinion, and I believe I'm pretty strong on it. If you are a business and you use your Rotary connections for future business and potential business and current business, in other words, it truly is a business expense. It becomes what's called a 162 deduction, which is an ordinary necessary business expense, and any expense incurred to make money is a deduction. So you would have to be either self-employed or your company would have to say, yes, that's important for me, and we're going to pay you for it. Let's go. Oh, before we get into that, I'm afraid to, well, since we have some extra time, I imagine that many of you have, in fact, I will bet you that 50% of the clubs that are on this call right now have a 501c3 side foundation of which you use those monies to contribute. And so everybody gets a deduction. Question, is a payment for a raffle a charitable deduction? If it was even done to a 501c3 foundation, remember not our regular Rotary Club, but to the foundation. Is it a charitable deduction? No, it's not. So when you buy a bunch of raffle tickets that even from the Meals on Wheels and from the Boys and Girls Clubs or whatever it is, that is not a charitable deduction. Now, what happens if we got a silent auction? Here again, I'm talking about a 501c3. Rotary clubs are 501c4, but I will bet you that half the people on the call here have a 501c3. So let's do a silent auction, and we have a silent auction, and we have somebody that donates special signed football, for example, and somebody pays $150 for it, and they writes a check to the Rotary Club Foundation. Is that a charitable deduction? The answer is no.
Oh, because they receive something for it.
That's exactly right. It's what's called a transactional. They receive something for it. Now, if for some reason they paid more than the fair market value of that asset, that would be a charitable deduction.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's not a charitable deduction. The only person that could get a charitable deduction for that is the person who donated the football.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is to 501c3s, but usually when I'm doing my class at Lone Star Pets in particular, half of the class has 501c3s in part, as well as 501c4s. The Rotary Club is a C4. The C3 is the foundation that you might have with your club. Okay, are you required to this? Treasurers need to know that they're responsible for filing with the federal government, the state government, and the city government. So are you required to file a tax return with the IRS?
Yes.
Yes. 990.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go to 7. What form are we required to file?
990 in or
990.
990, depending on if you exceeded the limit.
Okay, and how much is the difference, Kevin?
50,000 is the limit, right?
50,000 and under, you file a 990 in, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if it's over 50,000, up to 200,000, you would just file a 990 EZ. If it's over 200,000 in gross receipts, not net income, this is gross receipts, then you have to file a long form 990. And that's a little bit more difficult. Remember, this is gross receipts, not net income. So if you've got a large fundraiser that you go out and do under your Rotary Club, then it might get you up over that $50,000 and you'll have to file that tax return. Okay, going on to the next one. Are there any other forms to file with IRS?
Yes.
What?
1099 miscellaneous if you paid somebody more than $600.
Absolutely. Very good. Very good. Please know, and this is where, and IRS is really looking at these 1099s. They're really looking at if you're not filing them. In fact, if you file a 990 return, there's a question on there saying, did you file all your 1099s? And so they're really asking the question. 1099 you give to a person who you paid more than $600 for goods and services combined, or just services. And it's any non-corporate entity or an attorney. Now, I love telling this story, and I'm sure that there's 2 or 3 attorneys on the call. But so what I'm trying to say is, if you have pay $600 to an individual, to a partnership, to an LLC, which is a partnership, and or to an attorney, you will have to file a 1099. I tell this story because I think it's so funny. It also happened in Texas. Up in Texas, up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area a number of years ago, they've always had this 1099 rule, $600. In fact, they have never changed the $600, which is kind of funny that they haven't increased it for a number of years. But what they did was they did some audits up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and a lot of the attorneys were not filing correct tax returns. And so they said, okay, and so they made a nationwide review or nationwide law that said all attorneys, whether you're incorporated or not, if you get more than $600, you have to you get to receive a 1099. So if you are a nonprofit, you have to pay, excuse me, you have to give 1099s to all non-corporate people that that you pay over $600, and all corporate and or non-corporate lawyers that get over $600. We got some questions. Rent hall is an event, and therefore it is not subject to the 1099. You might put a 1099 under rent. Actually, that's not true, because you do have there is a place that you're supposed to send 1099s for rent. There's one for rent, one for interest, and one for miscellaneous. So that's rent event. Let me think this through. Most of the time, the venue that you're going to be using is going to be incorporated because they want that liability protection. If they don't have that liability protection, then yes, you need to, if they're providing services with that rent, then it needs to be done. Something that I found out just a couple of years ago, which is kind of unique. If you pay for it with a credit card and don't write a check, then it comes out on what's called the new 1099Ks. And so IRS already gets the information, and so you don't have to file a 1099. So if you will pay it with a credit card, you do not have to file the 1099s. I did not know that until, I guess one of my staffs finally dug into it and said, wait a minute, we got a bunch of these people that are paying this stuff now with credit cards. Don't mean debit cards, I mean credit cards. Then, and with the new, what's called a 1099K, that the vendor, the person you're paying, has to report to IRS and has to match up, so you don't have to do that. What else, what other forms would you have to file with IRS besides 1099?
Ronnie, we have two more questions.
Sure.
One says, what are the taxes due? Are they due on May the 15th?
The tax return is due on the 15th day of the 5th month after the year end. So therefore, a Rotary Club, it's due when?
November.
November 15th. That's exactly right. But you that are doing other nonprofits, and I'm glad that Becky and them told me that there would be other people that would be on, to let you know, the rule is 15th day of the 5th month after the year end, then you can get a 6-month automatic extension if you apply for it. If you do not apply for it, the penalty per day is $20 per day if your gross receipts are under $100,000. And no, under $1 million, your gross receipts are over that, the penalty is $100 a day that you do not turn your tax, you do not file a tax return. So it's pretty extensive. You want to make sure that you file them. Number two, if you do not file your tax return for 3 years in a row, even the 990N, you will lose your tax exemption. If you lose your exemption, you're under what's called, and I don't know whether I have in this outline or not, you will lose your exemption, and therefore you will also not be able to use the group exemption number that Rotary International provides for you. See, whenever you get a new club, you just notify Rotary that you've got this new club. Rotary notifies IRS that they are a part of Rotary's umbrella, and then therefore you still have to file the tax return, but you don't have to go through the application, which is a Form 1023. You don't have to go through the application of becoming exempt. If you do, and I've had some Rotary clubs that we've had to do it for, if they do not file the 990 or the 990 EZ or the 990N for 3 years in a row, then we have to go do two things. Number one, we have to file with IRS the Form 1023, which is a pretty extensive form sometimes. There's now 1023 EZ, but it's a pretty extensive form, and you no longer can use Rotary International's group exemption number. So you do not want to not file tax returns, even if it's just the 990N. And what we didn't talk about on the 990N, the 990N is nothing but an electronic postcard. I can't see everybody. This is a very unusual situation for me because I read body languages and I read whether people are understanding what I'm saying or not, or with it or not. So please bear with me. But the 990N has to be filed. It's for any gross receipts under $50,000. It's a postcard, and it's usually not a postcard. It's an electronic postcard. All you do is list your name, your federal ID number. You just go online, your name, your federal ID number, and your officer, and you swear that your gross receipts are under $50,000. It's very easy. I saw some questions.
One of the other questions is what about reimbursements for district or club officers? Are you required to send them a 1099?
No. Good question.
All right. And then the next one says, sorry, Becky had to leave to go to another meeting, but she thanks you again, Ronnie, for participating and helping us.
Okay. All right. All right. We've got 1099s. You've got 990s. What else might you have to do to IRS? How many of you, and like I said, I can't see you because of what we've got set up, but some of you may have your own executive director. And if you've got your own executive director, which is an employee, then you've got W-2s, payroll tax returns, things of that sort. So don't forget those. And those that are in other nonprofit organizations, you definitely would know that you have to do that as well. Okay, let's go to the next. Okay, before we go to the payments to Rotary International, is there any more questions as it relates to your requirements to IRS? What I didn't put into the outline, but I might as well bring it in right now. Do you have any reporting requirements to the state of Texas? Maybe.
You would if you had filed a sales tax filing with the state.
I think Kevin's got an accounting degree somewhere, and he's kind of my ringer in here, but I like that. He's exactly right. If you're selling items, you could be subject to, and you would be most likely subject to sales tax, and you've got to file those sales tax returns probably annually, because the dollar amount may not be that much, but it is something that you would have to file. So there is a sales tax return, and that sales tax return is paid to the state, with a portion of it going to the city and a portion of it going to the state. Okay. If there's no other, no. The question was, does it include silent auction items? Actually,
Because you had said earlier that if it was above the value, then it's a donation. But if it's the value and they purchase it, is that a purchase?
well, it is called a transaction. It's not necessarily a purchase, but a transaction. In the nonprofit world in the state of Texas, you're given basically two or 3 days, I can't remember what it is, of what's called exempt days, in which they won't charge you for sales tax at all. But if you're selling something on a regular basis, let's say, and let me also tell you, if you're selling something on the web on a regular basis.
Like a t-shirt or hat or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
Got it.
Okay, payments to Rotary International. How much are the fees? What's the per capita dues this next year? $34.50.
Yes.
I'm cheating. I'm looking. I asked for I got it was $34 this last year. This next year it goes up to $34.50. What I do not know, and I've tried to find very quickly and I didn't get it, but this is something that you will need to be, and I've already talked to my treasurer, not my treasurer, to my executive director and said, have you received a bill from Rotary International? And the answer was no. And they haven't seen it, so they don't know what they're going to charge them for the Rotarian or the Council on Legislation. But we all know now that it's calculated based upon 6 months, right? And it's calculated based upon the number of members that Rotary says you have on July the 1st and January the 1st. A few years ago, no, some of you, and I see some of you've got a little bit of gray hair, and some of you are missing a little hair, so therefore you're kind of like me, but used to that you would turn your numbers in, and you wouldn't turn your numbers in 30 days later because you're trying to see if everybody would sign up for membership. Can't do it anymore. Whatever Rotary International has on their rolls as of July the 1st and January the 1st, that is the number that you pay on. So it's important for you now as treasurers and president-elects to make sure that you get your billings out and find out what members are going to come back so you can get that money up front, because otherwise you might be billed for members that may sign in August that they're not going to be a member, but you had to pay at least 6 months worth of RI dues, and there is no adjustment for that at all. And so I've kind of answered the other question, when are they due? And obviously they're due within 30 days after the year end. I mean, after the July 1st and the December 1st. Go to the next. Payments to district. This I do not know. This is something that you do need to know beforehand. Your district may be having well, let me back up. When is the decision made? No, let's back up. Who decides the amount of dues that the district is going to charge?
Our district finance committee does, and it is currently set at $34 per member.
Okay.
It's approved by the president-elect.
There you go. That a boy, John. The finance committee can make the recommendation, but the approval has to come from the president-elects, which is usually done at PETS, or at least, and it has to be notified. Any adjustment has to be sent to the president-elects 30 days before that vote. Now, sometimes it's done at PETS, and sometimes it might be done at district assembly. But please understand that the president-elects will determine the amount of dues, the final vote of what your dues are for your district. And he says, yours is how much?
Currently $34.
That was this year. We're in discussion right now about what next year we're going to recommend.
Now, the question is, on the $34, is that collected one time after July 1st, or is it split in half?
It's collected one time.
Okay. And most districts are done that way. That is correct. So the amount of money that the club will pay at the beginning of the year, both to the district and to Rotary National, is a little bit more than they'll pay as of July the 1st. Let's talk about budget questions. Why does your club prepare a budget? What's the purpose of a budget?
Know how you're going to spend your money.
Yeah, for planning, you can't do anything without planning with the budget.
It's good. It's done for planning. Where you're going to spend your money. I think of the budget like a cone, and you prepare a budget, and it's kind of like a cone, and all the income and expenses go in the top of it, and the results come out of the bottom. And the budget becomes almost a barrier to say, okay, we don't go outside this. This is this is our marching orders. This is what we do. So if you're a nonprofit organization, and you have a staff, then the board will come up with a budget and give it to the staff and say, okay, this is the amount of money and expenses you have, and the results that we want to come out are down here at the bottom, and we're going to judge you based upon how well you do, based upon the results that we have now told you, but we've given you the budget. So the budget is more than just keeping you in line. Who prepares your budget? And all of y'all will be a little bit different.
It's a collaboration between the president and the treasurer, I would think. Or the board.
I'm sorry, the president and treasurer and who?
And possibly the board for some people.
Anybody else want to unmute themselves and answer?
Yeah, this is Charlie Pareda from Lake Conroe. That's how we do it. With the treasurer works with the president to establish the budget, but then it goes to the board for initial approval, and then to the entire club to approve it.
Did you say the entire club for what?
For approval.
Okay. I will bet I like that approach, and I think that's a good approach. I will bet that of the clubs that are on the call right now, 50% of them do not have the club approval. And I recommend that even though the club may not require to be a vote of the club, that the board send that budget to them and let them know what it is, even though it may not be the way in which they do it. Because I would guess, based upon my experience with Lone Star Pets, about half of the clubs do not have their board, do not have their membership approve it. They just let the board approve it. In fact, in our club, and we're a large club, and our membership does not approve it at all. It's only to the board. So there we go. Who approves your budget and why? And so you've got, I think you're going to have 50% of them are board members, 50% are the membership. I liked Charlie's comments. In fact, you'll see, I've got I think I do here. I've got a sample of a way in which I think the best approach would be. And in your case, what you said is very good. Usually what happens is you will have the treasurer will put together the budget, will give you the information, will give the finance committee or the board some understanding as to what the history has been, work up kind of a budget, go talk to the president and see what special ideas or special projects they want to do, come back, continue to work on the budget, then take it to the finance committee or to the board, at which time the president has to say, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, this is why the budget's where it is. The treasurer will give historical information as to saying, well, yes, this has worked in the past, or no, this hasn't worked in the past, or this is where I think it's going to be. And so you go forward with that. And so then the board votes on it. Then the board will take, if it goes to the membership, that it goes to the membership and the membership votes on it. And if it doesn't go to the membership, then it probably should at least be posted for the membership. Who monitors that you're staying within your budget?
Treasurer.
Treasurer
And the board.
and the board. Absolutely. The board is responsible. That is their fiduciary responsibility, because they have approved that board, or they should have, well, they have approved the board, whether with the membership as well. They still approve the board. That they've got to make sure that because they got a fiduciary responsibility. If they go way outside that budget, they've got a responsibility to the rest of the membership. And how do you make sure that you're doing that?
Quarterly budget analysis.
We actually go over it every board meeting. We have a treasurer's report every board meeting in order to look. And so all the board members get to see it at that point.
That's good. How large a club do you have, Barbie?
We're only like 32. We got a new member. We might be 33.
Okay.
Small club.
No, that's okay. And I just was curious as to because all different sizes do it a little bit different way, but you're required to stay within budget. What happens if you incur expenses outside of the budget? What happens?
Got to get approval from the board.
You do have to get approval from the board?
Normally, if we incur something outside the budget, then when the board member steps up and goes, okay, I'll donate that.
What happens if you have an expense, an unusual expense, like an event or that went over because of, you had a contract, but then there was more drinks served, or there was more golf, or there was whatever it might be, or there was more people eating a meal, and it just went over.
It might be good to, I hadn't thought about this. Maybe clubs have like a tolerable limit, like $100 or something.
Very good, Kevin. Very good. In other words, now, but the club needs to have this as part of their policy. The policy should be that if you go over budget X amount, that's okay. If it's more than that, there has to be a vote of the board, if possible, a vote of the finance committee, whatever it might be. You need to have some sort of accountability and but you need to have it in writing. Sometimes people will say, you'll see it there, is can you amend the budget at midterm? And you can amend the budget for big items at midterm if you want to. I'm not a big proponent of amending a budget, because the budget was your guidelines that you were starting with at the very beginning of the year. And you just have to explain that you're over budget because of this or that. If you were to be audited, the auditors would look at any time your expenditures is more than 10% of what you budgeted. They will come in and ask you, why is it over that, and get a comfort level that is reasonable. Because remember, the board approved the budget. The people writing the checks are the treasurer and the president, or whoever has the signature authority, or our staff, if you've got a large organization, not a Rotary Club, but a large nonprofit. So please understand that budgets are guidelines. Next question. Is it, no, I'm sorry, back up. I meant next question that I was going to ask. Thank you. Do you have, if you go over a line item, or can you go over it in groups? In other words, can it be bunched together? Can it be program budget as compared to line item budgets? And does the board have the ability to move money around as far as expenditures from one area to another?
I'm going to say yes and yes.
As a board, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your members. And so therefore, I recommend that all of these policies and procedures be written down so everybody knows this is what you can do. Here again, I would bet that 50% of the people on the call will say that we have, and if I were doing my normal presentation, I get a show of hands, and so I could gear my presentation toward one or the other. Can't do that with this. So in your particular case, you got some people that say, you know, those are line items and you have to stay within the line items. If you're over 10%, you got to get justification. And others will say, well, no, we're going to do it by programs, and we spent more on entertainment, but we spent less on beverages or stuff of this sort. And so if you have that as treasurer of the organization, make sure you got policies. So if you're going to be doing things, you're doing things based upon what everybody has approved as far as the policies and procedures, and then therefore you can't be held up later on.
So Ronnie, I have a quick question. This is Barbie from Aggieland Club, and again, so when you're saying that we need to write all this down and we need to put those policies down, this may be stupid, but where do you write those policies? Is that written in on your budget? Are there on your budget you write that?
Your nonprofit should have a document that's called policies and procedures.
And so we can amend that at different times?
Oh yeah, at any time. And do not put this in your bylaws.
Okay.
Look at Kevin. I told you I had a ringer accountant in here. Do not put it in the bylaws, because the bylaws have to be approved sometimes by the board, and sometimes bylaws have to go all the way to membership, and that makes everything real sticky. And you don't want, you need some flexibility. So I'm talking about policies and procedures that you're going to follow, and the way in the normal nonprofit world, I didn't explain at the very beginning. I do about 115, 120 nonprofits. 501c3s, 2s, 6, 7s, whatever like this. So I've got a little bit of experience in all those different areas, and I've seen them do all different things. So in your particular case, you need to I lost my train of thought.
So Ronnie, are you a CPA?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. It should be on my thing. I've owned my own practice. We've got 9 people here, and I've had my own practice since '73. So my gray hairs are real. And we do about 40, we're about 60 nonprofits and audits. And then we do about 150, 135, 140 nonprofit tax returns and stuff of that sort. So anyway, I didn't need to be talking about who I was, but I'm just saying that's where I'm coming from. And so I'm trying to also help those of you that are on other boards to understand, your Rotary Club may be only doing this because it's all volunteers, whereas when you go to that nonprofit that's got staff, that staff is really hanging out there, and they need to be really told what to do. In this particular case, your policies and procedures can be written down. You need to also have a treasurer, and maybe it's mainly through the policy and procedures, so that you can transfer knowledge from one treasurer to the next as to this is what we do, this is how we do it, this is why we do it, things of this sort. And later on, if you need some examples, send me an email and I'll see if I can find some things that y'all might want to do.
And Barbie, this is Charlie. I attended this in person last year, and I contacted Ronnie probably 2 or 3 times throughout the year, and every time he answered, wasn't always the answer I was looking for, but he did answer it. So feel free. He's a great guy with a wealth of knowledge. The other point I wanted to make is that whenever we do any event, I always, as a treasurer, I always make sure that person that's in charge of that knows what the budget is ahead of time, and that you don't have 2 or 3 people that don't realize what the budget is. And that's, in years past, I've seen us go over it, but since we kind of instituted the new policy of whoever's in charge of the next program, whether it's a social program or even a service project, here's your budget, and we've been able to stay within it. Or like somebody else said, get somebody to donate if you're going to go over.
Thank you, Charlie. And in fact, I appreciate that input, because in most of my presentations, I really do use everybody that's there, because all of you have different experiences. And so instead of me just talking about it, you kind of can learn from each other, and you can learn the great techniques that one person's doing. Oh, wait a minute, you're doing this, I can do that. That type of stuff. And so, and there is, like I told you earlier, there's really no right answer on some of those. So as it relates to, we talked about the budget, we've talked about, can you amend the budget? Any other questions and policies and procedures that you really do need to have to protect yourself? You as treasurer need to be protected, and you need to have policies and procedures so that this is what you're doing, and you're following them. You need to work, the treasurer needs to work very closely with the president, and so that the president can, because the president is the bell cow, the one that's really making things happen, although the treasurer is the one that provides the funding and the expertise. I'm going to go through this very quickly, because Charlie's already kind of come up with what we like to do, where the treasurer develops a draft budget based on prior year's information, anticipate current year information, committee chair recommendations, and any strategic planning document. It will include all backup documents. Then the president reviews the draft budget and makes suggestions based on his or her plans for the year. Treasurer updates the draft budget with the president's suggestions for meeting with the board of directors. This would be an example, Barbie, of a process that would be written down. Y'all can do it any way you want to, but this is just an example. And then so when the treasurer comes in, and the club will know, and the board will know, hey, this is our process, and we're going to do it every year this way. And then, so going on down to the next page, the president and treasurer present the draft to the board. There's full participation by the board. The president explains his or her priorities. Treasurer answers those questions as to history and the probability of success. And so you could have a conflict, so you better make sure you got a good relationship with the treasurer. Then after any judgments, the budget's approved by the board of directors. If the club bylaws state the budget must be approved by the membership, it's taken to them for a vote. Now, let's go to the next one, because this is If the membership approval is not required, it's still a good policy for full disclosure. Yes, there is a way to, a copy of these slides, and I will send them to you. The approved budget is then given back to the treasurer to include in monthly financial statements. That's important because now what are we going to use these monthly, let's back up. What are we going to use these monthly financial statements for? This is the guidelines that you're looking for to say, this is what we say we're going to spend. This is where we have spent. And Joe, that is the question that I really want to bring up and talk to in just a minute. So don't forget to remind me, because that's what because of the special CV-19 that's going on right now. I'm very curious to see how each one of the clubs are addressing that. The budget is given back to the is given back to the treasurer. To include in the monthly financial statements. And then we've already talked about that the board of directors monitors that on a monthly or quarterly basis. Very, very, very important. The next few slides are slides of just examples. You will see that it's a very simple, but it's just an example. Everybody does it differently, but you've got your revenue from dues, your dues, meals, initiation fees, assessments. You've got your budget, you got your current year, and you got your last year. And what you've got is those first two lines. Is the first line is your operation, how many people at what type of rate to get to a particular number. So it's a very simple, very easy way to do it. Then down below, of course, you have your meals, you got your room rental, you got your RI dues, you got your district dues. And so that's your main operations, or your main budget for your operations. Now go to the next page. Now this is your civic operations. And quite frankly, we do recommend, and RI does recommend as well, that you keep your civic activity separate from your operations. If you've got a 501c3, this is where this will go. If you don't have a 501c3, we'd still say that you need to have a separate, you don't have to have a separate bank account, but it is probably recommended that you do that. And then you'll have your donations, the gross revenues from your first, second, third fundraisers, any money that you now will be receiving from RI for the district governor's expenses, which is new procedure that's going to be taking place. Oh, wait a minute, that's district governor, I'm sorry. Forgot my audience. And then for expenses, we got fundraisers, One Tooth, and service projects and things of this sort. And so you've got at the bottom, you've got at the very bottom, it should show beginning cash, ending cash, and you're just on a cash basis. So that being said, that's what that is. One of the questions that came up, which I thought was a great question, and I really want to hear input from y'all because you're on the front lines. How are you dealing with the CV-19? How are you dealing with coming up with a budget? How are you dealing with your meal costs? What are you doing? And Kevin, since you need to, I'm going to come out and work on you for a minute.
Well, it's been a little bit of a challenge because everything's changed. Trying to see what it's going to look like going forward with this year not looking like a typical year as far as our expenses go. So it's a little bit more projection, I would think, involved.
Ronnie, I'll jump in there as Charlie, like Conroe. We bill quarterly, and so what we did since this started in the last quarter, but we kind of figure it's going to carry on through April, May, and June. We just looked at our cash on hand, and we're one of those organizations. We have the 501c3 and the C4. So we call the C4 or C3 the operating fund. And so we looked at, we weren't going to have any expenses for the meals and everything else. So could we absorb what we normally would have collected? We had a healthy balance of somewhere a little over $6,000 in our operating account, and we're just going, we're not going to be able to have to do any expenses probably until 1 July. So whether it was the installation banquet or what we call our steak and beans every year. We just decided to waive everybody's club dues and not charge them. We still charged everybody the RI dues and the district dues. So the bill went out for this quarter for $28.77, I think, and everybody was pretty thrilled with that. So that's how we handled it. So we
Okay.
didn't do an amended budget. We're just going to have excess funds in that category at the end of the year.
It will be very important in the nonprofit world. What you try to do is you want a reserve of at least 3 months and hopefully 6 months. And it'll be very important to see 3 months of operations or 6 months of operations is what the guidelines are. 6 months is a good number. But it's going to be very important for these nonprofits to have had a little bit of reserve or a decent reserve, just like some of the restaurants that have been on a very tight budget. Many of those restaurants are just not going to make it because they didn't have those reserves that are necessary. So we're going to find out which ones had it and didn't. But I'd love to hear some of everybody else's, what your clubs are doing as well.
So I'll just speak up right quick. This is Barbie again from Aggie Land. And what we did is there's people that pay yearly. We have quite a few people that pay yearly for their dues. And so anything that went to the meal, we're just going to credit that for whenever we go back. And our treasurer's going to have a great time with that, I think. And then, but as far as dues, we're still collecting dues because we're still having virtual meetings. And then we're still, there's some service projects that people can go out to if they feel comfortable doing it. And so that's what we're doing at this point.
It's going to make budgeting really tough, isn't it?
It is. I don't know how we're going to budget. I haven't sat down with my treasurer at this point, and I need to sit down with him and go, okay, we need a budget. We know it. We know right now we have enough funds to do our big service project in November. We have that, but it's going to hurt next year really bad. So that's what I'm concerned about. How do you get a president-elect in or a president nominee if you don't have any money?
Well, this is going to be interesting. We'd like to hear from all of you, if at all possible, because this is going to be really tough. And this may be an example where you may do a couple of things. You may do a 6-month budget and then a 6-month budget, or you may do a worst case scenario to see if you can, what you make it. There's a lot of different ways in which you may be doing budgets. That's what I'm just curious as to see how y'all are going to address it.
So like in our club, our operating side has a very healthy reserve. And so we have a separate side. We have the operating and we have the foundation side. And so there's consideration of the possibility of using some of that money over to the foundation so we could do a lot of our project work through that way, shifting money that way.
Hey, Ronnie, this is Sally Andrews with Viter Rotary Club, and I just want to throw out an idea. We're a pretty small club. We have about 30 members, and we do a lot of our projects through grants. I'm the grant writer for Viter ISD, so I have a ton of experience, but we've done a lot of our bigger projects through the support of local grants. And I know right now with COVID, a lot of entities are putting out grants that just might help somebody to get over a rough patch. Go ahead and do a project. And with most grants, you can write some of the grant for your own operating expenses. So that's just a thought. It's what we do in Viter. We practically run our projects on grants in our club.
All right, thank you. That's very good.
You're
So
welcome.
Sally, are you a 501c3?
No, ma'am.
You're a 501c4?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
you're still getting approved for grants for the community?
Absolutely. We do a lot of local grant writing. We have a foundation that's local, and we have our green bus project with everybody in District 5910 sick of hearing about us, but we do meals and books for kids. And we write through a local foundation that's managed through the Hancock Whitney Trust in Beaumont, and they don't care if you're not a 501c3 as long as you're considered a nonprofit. then you can write for a grant. So that's something that you might want to explore is what do you have locally that you're actually eligible for? Like companies like Entergy will not fund Rotary because, unless you have a 501c3. But there are some of those family foundations and specific trusts in your area that may just be willing to fund you. So definitely look into it. It's well worth
Yeah,
it.
thank you so much. I didn't
You're
even
welcome.
think about doing that.
You're quite welcome.
Good ideas. Anybody else?
Yeah, Ronnie, this is Rhonda from Palestine. All we're doing, we're doing our Zoom regularly, whatever we're doing every week. But all we're doing is we have knocked out the food cost. So we're still, the same. The budget for each month is still the same. We just took out the food. But I think the one thing that we're looking at is how do we budget for the next year, which I will be president of. So, we're looking at what we have to cover all the costs that we do during the year. And Mary Rom is our treasurer. So she's looking at the budget to see what do we have to have, because generally we have our big fundraiser in September. So we're looking at that to see how we can do it differently, that we can raise what we need to have to do all our community projects for the year.
Thank you. Good input. Like I said, as you can see, and y'all are coming up with some different ideas of people are going to do things. Anybody else? Ruth?
I'll defer to our executive secretary, Uli.
Uli, you got called out. Uli, turn your microphone.
Uli, you're muted.
Hey, while we're waiting on Uli to unmute, I'll just say that Inviter, we no longer charge for meals. If you want to have a meal, you have to bring it with you, and that's helped a lot of people G's-wise.
Do you hear me? Okay.
There's Uli.
Yes, we
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
unmuted.
No,
We can hear you.
Amy,
Uli, we can hear you.
I don't know whether you.
Uli, we hear you.
Maybe turn up your volume so you can hear us.
Amy, can you?
Uli, we hear you.
I don't know why.
All right, I'll answer. So what Uli did was that he put out with our quarterly invoice, he gave our
Something
members
doesn't
the
work.
option. Are you good?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can
We
hear
heard
you
you the whole
now.
time.
Okay. One thing that I want to bring up with the current situation that clubs can't cancel their meetings. We charge our members quarterly for the meals. Now the meetings have been canceled. What we did is we offered our members the credit for all the meals for the meetings that have been canceled. And so that at the next bill, they have the option either to take that credit or to donate the money back to the club or to our foundation. And so far, the responses are just coming in. About half of the members donated the money back. So they did not want that credit. But you have to think about it when you charge your members for the meals, not by when they come in at the meeting, but ahead of time on their quarterly bills, that you have to consider somehow to refund or them or give a credit.
Okay. And I would imagine that now going forward, what do you think you will be doing as it relates to creating your budget for 2021?
Well, that is, I haven't looked over the budget yet, but I think we have to see. Of course, we hope that by July we have regular meetings again. Probably
Okay.
not June, but we don't know it yet. So we will continue charging the members the usual quarterly fees that we charge them. All the fundraising that we do goes into our club foundation. So the fundraising really doesn't affect our operating budget because that money is outside our operating budget.
Right. Now, let me also mention, Barbie, I'll come right back to you in just a second. Let me also mention that please know that expenditures out of your 501c3 need to be for charitable, religious, education, or scientific. By nature, they have to be for that. There could be a small amount of administrative costs for the foundation itself, but be careful about spending money in the foundation over to the 501c4 organization. That's really a no-no unless you're paying for some services that that are necessary that the C4 is providing C3. Barbie.
Most of the good things that we do locally are that money comes out of our foundation and not out of the club.
Okay, great. Okay, Barbie.
So my question is what are most of the clubs doing? Because I know for a fact that in between now and the end of 2020, there are going to be some members that are not going to feel comfortable coming to meet. And so are most of the clubs just going to do a certain percentage of people might come and meet and eat the meal and then the rest of them won't? Are y'all going to be doing multiple invoicing for different people that don't feel comfortable coming out? How is everybody else doing that?
Well, some people call me the perpetual optimist. We're just assuming we're going to go back to normal operations on 1 July. And if we don't, then we'll handle it at that point in time. The good news is we'll collect the money, the dues and the meals. And then if we have to go back, like Uli has said, then if you have to go back and give them a credit because we didn't start up, well, we'll handle that. But since we do it by quarterly, that'll give us 3 months to get settled into the new year.
Sam, I saw you raising your head, shaking your head. What were you going to add? You're on mute.
Sam, you're muted.
No, we took away the meal cost, and we're just going to bill everybody for their dues, and as soon as we start back, we'll pick up the meal cost to go back. We're fortunate enough. We're 186 members, and we had money in the bank, and so we missed a fundraising project, but we're going to go ahead and cover our scholarship programs and cover the other things that we need. And so we're thankful we're in good shape.
What are you doing? Is anybody thinking about coming back with the meals, and then you've got some senior citizens or some people that are susceptible to the virus that still want to participate but don't feel as comfortable? Are y'all thinking about doing a Zoom type of thing for them as well at the same time? Is anybody looking at that?
Rotary Club of Lake Conroe in the future probably both do live streaming or Zoom as well as in-person meetings. And then I'm sure that if people are uncomfortable, that the board would approve just waiving their meal cost or reimbursing them or give them credit going forward.
Yeah, our club is similar to what Sam is. We're about 200 people. We used to be 200. We may be a little down to what his number is now. But they're trying to figure out a way for to stream it to people that are at home as compared to, or at their offices, as compared to coming to the actual meeting for a period of time, mainly because we've got some senior citizens that are going to be a little bit uncomfortable, and we don't want to lose their activity or their involvement. And so it may not be a Zoom, but it may be a streaming in which they can do that. In fact, it's interesting. We've had some pretty large turnouts on our Zoom. I've seen some people that I've never seen that are on the Zoom, which is great. I mean, it's a different audience. So I'm just curious as to ideas. Anybody else? I don't want to drag this out. I really wanted to hear how y'all were going to address the situation that we were in, and sounds like some are going full steam starting July 1st. Some are making some adjustments. I think whatever you might do, you're going to need to have a backup plan. Nobody ever thought we would have something like this in our lifetime. And so, I mean, this is worse than the 88, 89, the oil drop, the real estate drop, and the banking industry all hitting at the same time, going haywire. And so, but anyway, I don't want to keep anything else, keep y'all very long. Barbie, answer your question.
My question would be if anybody out there as a club starts setting up where they can meet and Zoom or do whatever you're doing, I would love to hear from you guys on how that's working and how you did it. Our venue that we normally meet at reached out to me today, and they can set us up for 3 tables of 6 people. And so, but I don't know how that's going to work with the rest of the club, and how do you figure that out? So I would just like to reach out to all you guys, because y'all are veterans. I'm not that much of a veteran. So if y'all can tell me what you're thinking, that would be great. And that can just be emailing me at barbie@padarch.com or through Club Runner. That'd be great.
I appreciate it, Barbie. And I too would like to know, just from a personal standpoint, I've got a wife that's very active in Rotary, but is also has some health issues, and so therefore she's real susceptible. And I don't want to get her involved, and she doesn't. You know, she's basically stayed at home, other than homeschooling my 4.5-year-old 2 or 3 days a week. Other than that, it's been pretty much staying at home. And so my 4.5-year-old grandson, not my kid, thank you. But yes.
I'm Leon Wilhite from Palestine, and we have been able to do Facebook Live in Palestine for a couple of years. And that has really been helpful for folks who couldn't get out even back before we didn't have this virus problem, and for makeups and other things. And I still think that's a pretty valid tool, because, at the club, we can still have presenters, and we can still, we could do our normal club activity. But I mean, we actually get the count. I mean, we get their observance either live, and it's recorded as well, so people can see it in a different time block. So I do think the Facebook Live is an option that people might ought to consider, particularly as we have split audiences where we'll, be able to meet and then need to have some way of dealing with our elderly or other people who are vulnerable. So
I have a
comment. All right, I'll look that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon.
Thank you.
Port Arthur.
Go ahead, Johnny.
Let me first of all welcome Delilah Francis to the table. We're proud of her and thankful that she's going to become our treasurer in a few weeks. In Port Arthur, we have been meeting using Zoom, and it's gone fairly well, although we're still working at encouraging our more mature, I guess I'll call it level members, to participate, even if just by telephone. And literally, as we speak, today and tomorrow, we're making calls to try to encourage them, find out how they're doing, and to see whether there's anything we can do to help them to get signed on through the Zoom platform. Now, with respect to meals, we're giving the option for those, for all the members to pay the same amount of dues that they've been paying, including the meal totals, if they wish. Otherwise, just deduct that from we've given them the amount they would pay outside of the meals. But if they choose to include the meal money in their payment, quarterly payments, those dollars will go to our youth scholarship, college scholarship program.
Okay, good suggestions. Okay, anybody else? I'm going to cut this off at 8:30, so that's an hour and a half. That's enough listening to a CPA talk, but that's the reason why I wanted to hear y'all, your comments. I think you've got some great ideas. I am available. I really am. Charlie's right. He did call me a few times, and he liked some of my answers, and he didn't like some of my other answers. But I told him how best I thought that it would work, and I do think that I have an ability. I used to have a partner for a number of years, and he was technically one of the best people I'd ever met, and so I would always take him projects and say, how about this or how about that? And he said, well, you can do it this way, but you can't do this. I said, okay. And I'll come back later on. All right, how about this? So I kind of pride myself on being able to, I don't pride myself on being the best IRS law person, but I do pride myself on trying to figure out a way to take care of my clients. So if I can help you in any way, my telephone number is at the end of the program, and also at the other end. And did Leon, did you, or no, who was it that asked for the slides? I believe they were sent out, but if they were not, my email address is on the bottom of the, well, you don't have it. So let me give it to you just in case it gets lost. It's Ronney, RONNEY, at Reynolds, REYNOLDS, Frank, FRANKE.com. And the telephone number is 512-206-3141. I'll be glad to answer your questions. And now, if it's an hour long, then we'll have to negotiate. But if 30 minutes, now Leon's was more than an hour long, but he made over 4 or 5 calls, and so therefore he got them all. He got all of. I mean, Charlie did. So he got all of his questions in. Thank y'all very much. Anything
Ronnie,
else?
Yeah,
yes.
one second. This is John Hathaway. I'm speaking on behalf of the district. I'm district finance chair, and we are looking at our budget for the 2021 year, and we do believe that the district dues will go down some degree. So hopefully you'll, as president-elects and treasurers, you'll be hearing something fairly soon. But we are in the process of making some adjustments based on the fact that our expenses will not be as high next year.
Great. Everybody's clapping for that. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Thank you, Barbie. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. And Ronnie, thank you for your expertise and giving us your time this evening. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. No problem.
Thank you, Ronnie. Good seeing you again.
Loved it.
I just want to say thank you so much to Amy and to Ava and to Ruth and to all the district trainers that we have out there. They have done a phenomenal job with these Zoom meetings, and I have learned way more. I think maybe more than if I had went to district. Just saying, it's so much more personal, I think, and I've learned a lot. And thank you guys so much for setting these up.
Happy to do it. And thank you guys for coming. And then if you want, feel free to join in on Thursday night where we talk about public image.
See y'all. Take care.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Ronnie. Good seeing you again. Take care.